Thanks, Pete. And thanks, everybody. I was coming to a conference like this not long ago to give a very similar kind of workshop on storytelling and the power of that to do business building. And I asked a friend of mine who is a VC, what advice would you have for founders when it comes to storytelling? And he said, I wouldn't have any advice whatsoever. And I said, well, what the hell are you talking about? And he said, when it comes to storytelling and founders, their attitude is, I've got this. And so I'm happy to see so many people here today, and I'm happy that you're proving my friend wrong, so give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you. All right, before we go any further, I want everybody to stand up and move maybe a little closer to somebody if you have seats in between. And I want you to just take a minute and introduce yourself to the person next to you and give them one thing that you want to get out of today's workshop and why. And then we're going to come back and get some comments from the audience. Okay, great. Why don't we all have a seat? Have some great discussion going here, so lots of energy, which is great. Great discussions here, great people, so thank you very much. All right, now we're going to go a little bit around the room, and I want to get a feel, and I want others to get a feel for what is it that you're trying to get out of today and why. And so I think Kate may have a microphone, or I can jump out, but anybody want to talk a little bit about what you talked about in your groups? What do you want to get out of today and why?
Just go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll come to you.
Yes, exactly. Here we go.
Today, I want to learn about what some of these great speakers have done in their lives, and I want to get their experience. I'm younger, and I want to hear what they have to say and the advice that they have to give, and I just want to soak it all up and learn today.
Excellent. And I met you before. You're a high school student at Madeira High School. All right. Good job. Good job getting out of school today, too. So let's give them a round of applause. All right. Who else wants to step up? I know we've got some talkative folks here, so anybody else? There we go. Richard?
Yeah, Justin and I are fascinated by how do we tell a better story and how do we do it in a way that is meaningful for the client or the other person we're telling the story to, because we know how difficult that is to connect with somebody at a deep level without having your passion about your product kind of run the conversation or get you too entrenched in your own thinking without really connecting and figuring out what matters to them.
Great, I love that. That's a great theme, is what matters to them and your target audience. So why don't we take one more and then we're going to keep going. Over there.
All right, so I was actually in the design thinking workshop and I did a pivot. I'm really lured by design thinking, but I've put story literally in the name of my brand, which is Seed Story. So I figured, I really better be in the one about storytelling.
I like that. And I've heard of your business, so good work.
Oh, well,
good job.
all right.
Excellent. All right, we're going to move on. Has anybody ever done media training? Okay. It's basically a simulated interview situation where you sit down with a client or someone who's getting ready to do media interviews and you do role playing. And so not long ago, I sat down with one of my clients who was fairly senior in the company, and he wasn't as arrogant as this guy, but he essentially had an interesting experience when I asked him the first question. So we sat down, had the lights on, the camera rolling, and I didn't ask him a gotcha question. I didn't ask him a 60 Minutes question. I asked him a very simple question that I thought would be one that he could knock out of the park. And the question was, tell me about your company. And he froze. And this was a number 2, guy in a pretty large corporation. And he felt bad, but what I told him was, even when it comes to the great storytellers of our time, people like Steve Jobs, they really had to work at communications. And so it was a passion. It was something that Steve Jobs, for instance, when he had to do one of his great product rollouts, he would start about a month ahead of time and treat it like a play, like a theatrical sort of presentation. And he would practice every bit of his intonation, where he wanted to pause, where he wanted to raise his voice, when he wanted to walk, all of those sorts of things. So he felt better after that. Okay, show me the money. That's really the subject of today's workshop. And what I want you guys to do today is walk away with one killer story that you can use to build your brand, build your company, build your reputation. And I'm not in the business of storytelling for entertainment's sake. What I want are stories that actually, again, are going to build your business and are going to change perceptions and are going to cause people to buy, to invest, to care, to think, to feel. But building the business is very important. What are some examples, and why do I believe so strongly in the value of story to build businesses? This is a great example from New York Magazine. If anybody's read it, it's great. And the journalist's name is Rob Walker. And he was very curious about things like, why is one painting on the wall worth $100 or selling for $100 and another one is selling for $8,000? Is the $8,000 painting really, 80 times as good? Or go back a ways to Air Jordans. Very similar in product performance to other shoes, and yet, why was it that Nike was able to charge, so much more? And so his hypothesis was that the power of story was what was driving the value, and it imbued meaning in this in a way that people connected with, not just rationally, but emotionally. And so he decided he was going to run an experiment. So he went out and he bought a jar of mayonnaise and a broken ceramic horse, and he put them up on eBay. And of course, they didn't garner a huge, reaction, a bidding war, anything like that. They came in each around $1. Somebody bought each of them. Then he went out and hired writers. And the writers put together stories to kind of surround these objects. So their backstory, their history, what made them special, who owned them. And guess what? When he put them up surrounded by story, the price of the objects went up exponentially. I think one was $80 and one was $100. I checked with a venture capital client of mine to really walk them through this deck and say, does this ring true from an investor standpoint? And the good news was he said yes. He kind of gave it the good housekeeping seal of approval. But I really pushed him on this one slide, which essentially was a Harvard Business Review study that said that story and self-presentation matters more to VCs than pedigree. And he said absolutely he agrees with that. He doesn't care as much about where you went to school or what your MBA was in, if you even have an MBA. What he wants to know is, what is your story? What are your qualifications? What is your product? What is the job to be done? And how you present yourself is key in that. It's not often that CEOs talk about marketing tactics in their quarterly earnings calls for analysts, but in this case of Airbnb, the CEO not too long ago did just that. And he had spent, or the marketing group had spent a lot of time doing, I guess, lead generation marketing. So a lot of emailing, a lot of what you might consider intrusive, forms of marketing. And a couple years ago, they switched to what they called story marketing. And story marketing was all about, again, making the consumer the hero in a journey where they changed their lives through travel. And guess what? The ROI shot through the roof. So they were able to spend a lot less on marketing and sell a lot more. This is the pitch deck and the slide that supposedly launched 1,000 ships for Mark Zuckerberg. And you'll see that there's kind of the rational side of this, which is some of the numbers and things, but then placed in there is a story from the Stanford Daily. And it's kind of scary knowing what we know now about some of the mental health effects of too much social media, but the gist of it was that there was this utter groundswell of support for Facebook on the Stanford campus. And it was that statistic and that endorsement from really a third party in the case of the media that really powered Facebook and led them to get their first round of investment. So story as part of investor pitches can be very important. So I kind of looked at today's audience, which is a great cross-section of people. So you'll see founders are the largest audience, but also we have a great connection of people that are supporting the ecosystem here. We also have some college students and high school students, obviously. So are there any college students in the audience? Great. Can you guys stand up? Where are you from? Just to embarrass you. Miami? All right, excellent. Let's give them a round of applause. I don't know how you guys got out of school, but good job. So I put this up because I want to make sure that whatever category, whatever audience you're in, that you see yourself today in this presentation. So if you're not seeing yourself and it doesn't feel relevant to your specific situation, call me on it and we'll try to kind of bring it home. We've talked about the business case. We're next going to talk about some characteristics of great storytelling. So again, I want you guys to be thinking already, and this is going to be a true workshop. The second half, we're going to spend some serious time developing your own stories. But first, we're going to have some theory, which I hate, but hopefully it'll be a framework that will be helpful. And then we're going to get into the actual application. So how many are interested in communicating better with investors? All right. Pretty good amount. How about consumers and customers? Okay, great, excellent. Anybody with media? You should add that to the list, I think, because media endorsements, which we're going to see in a minute, can be like consumer testimonials on steroids, really. So the important thing, and were people at the pitch presentation yesterday that Jake Whitman did? Probably some of you were. And they talked about the importance of tailoring your message or your story to individual audiences. And so he said that what he presents to an investor is not exactly the same as to a strategic partner or to a distributor or whatever. I think the big picture messages need to be similar, but they need to be tailored. And so this is kind of the way I think about communications. There's what your audience wants to hear and what you want to say. And you can't get caught in the extremes there. You have to find that perfect intersection and that sweet spot. And I believe in this, and I call it story relevance, and I feel so strongly about it that I've named my company Relevance. Story can be used across the marketing mix in many different situations, so I don't consider it just to be sort of a PR thing or a marketing thing. I think it can really bring to life in a powerful way what you're trying to do across all kinds of business situations. Okay. This is a typical pitch deck presentation, or table of contents, rather, and you saw a lot of this yesterday with the pitch workshop. I'm going to talk about 3 areas that I think story can play a huge role, and they can in all of these, but I think especially in the identification of the problem. So what is the job to be done? The target market, so who is it that you're actually trying to reach? And traction. Be that sales, be that early backing, be that testimonials, orders, any of those sorts of things. So first, the problem. My son works for a fast-growing startup in Brooklyn, and one of the founders leads his investor pitch with this story every single time. So, and anytime, no matter what the audience is, really, he talks about this. It's so powerful. So he says that his father worked in Brooklyn walk-ups for many years, and the founder watched his dad struggle with every step of the way in doing home construction. And then fast forward to the time when he became a homeowner, the founder did, and he needed to renovate his bathrooms or kitchens. And he said, my God, you know, this is the most broken system. It's so intolerable. If ever there was a industry in need of disruption, it's this one. So again, a powerful way to sometimes lead your audience to kind of draw them in is an origin story. Next, target audience. So it's all well and good to have your total addressable market and those sorts of things and your statistics, your psychographics, your demographics, whatever the case would be. It's also helpful sometimes in story form to really personalize your target audience. So can you put it with one person? I believe she's not a real person, but you still get the idea that this is a company that is going to help with second opinions, and this is the situation that, that Nina is in. So personalize your target audience, a great way to tell stories. And then finally, how many people know about Netty? Okay, good. About half the people. So Catherine Baxter, who founded Netty, works out of Union Hall here, so you've probably seen her around from time to time. And one of the great things that she's been able to do is she's hired some people in New York that have been able to place her story in amazing places, including the Drew Barrymore Show, Forbes Fast Company, etc. And I really consider, as I think I said before, for media mentions to be like consumer testimonials on steroids. So I've seen a lot of you guys in Cincinnati Business Courier stories and newsletters and things like that. Think about, as Jake did yesterday in his pitch deck, talking about some of the stories that others have written about you, because that's the power of a third party. It's not you talking, it's someone else talking. Okay, so next we're going to quickly go through characteristics of great storytelling. So again, be thinking about your story, be thinking about what it is. You've seen a few examples, and here's some tips on how to think about that. So the first example is around the tension in stories. And tension in stories is very important because it kind of sets up sort of the plot. And I have a little thing I'm going to read here about this company, Bevel. Okay, sorry. And this is from the founder. As a black man, I have a different hair type. I have a different skin type. And those needs should be respected, he says. But as I walk down retail aisles, I deserve not only products that work for me, but also a design experience that doesn't make me feel like a second-class citizen. Black Americans spend about and this is from the founder of Bevel, Black Americans spend about $1.3 trillion per year, roughly the size of Australia's entire GDP. Despite having so much purchasing power, black women and men find themselves rummaging around the ethnic beauty aisle, searching for products that feature a 70-year-old black man in a towel drinking cognac while petting a tiger on the packaging, Walker says. So kind of depressing. So again, this is a great way to kind of set up a story that this company is not only providing a great product, but they're trying to kind of right a wrong. And there's sort of, not an enemy, but there's a system out there that they want to sort of fight against. So again, great example of tension. So could there be tension in your stories? Answers profound questions like Block. Why in the world can't there be a better home renovation experience? Same with Warby Parker. Before Warby Parker, there were no great design firm or great design companies that produced great glasses cheaply. So again, they're democratizing great design. They're bringing great design at an affordable price to the masses. And again, there's kind of some conflict here. There's an enemy. It's like big tobacco, big glasses. Why are big glasses so expensive in those types of companies? An essential role for the product. The key word I want you guys to look at here is enveloped, because what they're saying basically, and has anybody ever seen a preemie diaper? You have, yeah, if you have. It really breaks your heart because they're like this big. And so Pampers and P&G came up with this way to do it. They may be the only ones that provide the product. And so this idea of enveloping babies extended not just to the benefit to the baby, but they did programs that helped NICU parents and their families deal with all of the situations that they were dealing with. So they created sort of a nonprofit cause around this idea of enveloping not just the baby, but the family. So great storytelling can trigger great ideas that can really add some meaning to what a brand is trying to do. Rooted in truth, so it's very important that your stories ring true. There's a lot of kind of greenwashing out there. There's a lot of talk of purpose that doesn't really connect back to what you're trying to do from a product perspective, so make sure it's rooted in truth. We can't all be Toms, but there's great stories out there that you can talk about what you guys are doing in the community and what you're doing beyond just selling great products. So look for those. Then finally, and I think this is maybe the most important point in this kind of checklist of great storytelling, is the idea that you do not want to be, your brand should not be the hero in the story. Your brand should be the guide that's helping make great things possible for your target consumer. So when you're thinking about your stories, which we're going to actually spend about 5 minutes kind of writing or thinking about, think about this idea of you want to be Yoda. You don't want to be Luke Skywalker. Okay, now I think there's some brand strategists in the crowd, and I feel badly because I'm going to kind of take a bunch of different terms and kind of combine them for simplicity, for a framework. So when it comes to this whole space, what I'm going to suggest today is that you think about things in 3 ways. There's the big picture, which from a definitional standpoint can mean many things. So we've got dogs out here. It's a great story. Everybody loves to come to work with dogs. There's the big picture. It can be called the narrative. It can be called, the mission, the vision, all of those sorts of things. So there's that kind of high-level, never-ending story that really can come to life in a powerful way. There's the product, and that oftentimes is also called the value proposition. And then there's the story. And that's what we're really focused on today. So the story that brings to life the overall message and the big picture in a powerful way that will build your brand and not just entertain. So here's an example of the brand as the guide, not the hero. And so you'll see GoDaddy wants to really kind of change the world of work for people, get them into life-fulfilling. Hey, Rick, come on in. And they do that in this way to give people the tools to really live the kind of lives that they want. So again, this is the kind of story where the brand is the guide and the helper behind the scenes, not the hero. Now the story, again, we're talking big picture, product, and story. If we jump down to story, here's a great example of Uber's billionth trip. And so they celebrated this in a great way, and again, kind of showing the brand in a humble sort of light, kind of the opposite of how Uber shows up sometimes. But celebrating this great interaction and this great ride in London, which represented 1 billion trips for Uber. Okay, as we think about getting into developing your stories, let's think about the narrative or the big picture and the story, and kind of what the differences are. And we're about to kind of do some thinking around this. So the New Deal, obviously to fight poverty, to fight the effects of the Great Depression in the 1930s. Fireside chats were when Franklin Roosevelt would sit down before the country in front of a fireplace and do radio broadcasts where he would essentially say, here's a story about a coal miner in Kentucky, and here's what the New Deal is trying to do to lift him out of poverty and get him back to work. Christianity, big movement, obviously. Good Samaritan, a way to bring to life the messages of Christianity. Apple, think differently. And then the story being Steve Jobs, founder. Southwest Airlines, great example of a brand that people think about as moving around the country in a low-cost sort of way and in a fun way. And what's a story? A tale of above and beyond employee service. So I think this was Southwest, but there was a case where a flight was canceled or delayed until 11 o'clock at night, and there were no restaurants open at the airport. And so the crew ordered 20 pizzas for all the passengers. And you can imagine this created an incredible amount of buzz and goodwill. Even though that wasn't really the purpose to create PR, it did, and it became kind of a legendary story. So next, I want you to take a few minutes and think about, and this can be someone else's example, sort of the New Deal and the fireside chat, Apple Think Differently, and Steve Jobs' founder story, or your own experience. And then I'm going to ask people to come back. So for your own experience, another great example, again, with Nettie, is that her big picture narrative is around bringing joy and connection through pickleball. Her story is around an idea that came to life when she saw her boyfriend's parents do pickleball in their house during the quarantine in New York City. So that's where the idea was really born. So take a few minutes and come up with what's a big picture thing and what's a story that can help bring that to life. And then we're going to ask for one or two examples. So just take a few minutes now. All right, I see the minds thinking there. All right, I see some pens down, so let's come back in the interest of time. And does anybody have any kind of example that they want to throw out there? Okay.
We have a software called TikToks.
Uh-huh.
It's a time attendance CRM. Think of Slack and meets Salesforce.
Ah. Yes, Slack meets Salesforce. That's a great description.
So what we're attempting to do is cultural alignment.
Mm-hmm.
So with TikTok,
Mm-hmm.
how slow does
Oh.
work and how are others more prepared
Yep.
at the time they clock in. So aligning the rate of TikTok within our internal clocks
Ah.
across the workforce.
I like that. So great example of kind of big picture describing what the product and the company's mission is with a story that kind of brings it to life through kind of the morning routine. So we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to stop at that and talk a little bit about value proposition and product. So this is, again, we had the big picture, we got the product, and we have the story to bring it to life. So Netflix, great example here of value proposition. It describes perfectly what the product does. So watch movies, documentaries, or TV shows anytime on any device. So again, what's the difference between the big picture and the product? The big picture narrative is sort of mission focused. It's like I say an ongoing story, a story that never ends. The value proposition is more fixed in time. It's a product-focused thing. Again, narrative is open-ended, and so it should allow for massive amounts of messaging, whereas the value proposition is fixed in time. Narrative, again, is around the big picture. Value proposition is what is the job to be done? What is the problem that people are trying to solve? What are those customer pain points? So just to give a quick example, HubSpot, their big picture mission is all around helping businesses grow better. Their value proposition or their product is, and this is good, easy to use CRM. It's not fancy, but it kind of tells the story. CRM, but easy, kind of the opposite of most people's experience with CRM programs. Okay, execution. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about delivery and how you can bring your story to life through, hopefully not falling off the stage, and bring your story to life through great delivery. And so I'm going to show a little video here. It's kind of serious and academic, so bear with me, but let's take a look.
hear that? That's nothing. Which is what I, as a speaker at today's conference, have for you all. I have nothing. Nada. Zip. Zilch. Zippo. Nothing smart, nothing inspirational, nothing even remotely researched at all. I have absolutely nothing to say whatsoever. And yet, through my manner of speaking, I will make it seem like I do. Like what I am saying is brilliant. And maybe, just maybe, you will feel like you've learned something. Now, I'm going to get started with the opening. I'm going to make a lot of hand gestures. I'm going to do this with my right hand. I'm going to do this with my left. I'm going to adjust my glasses. And then I'm going to ask you all a question. By show of hands, how many of you all have been asked a question before? Okay, great. I'm seeing some hands. And again, I have nothing here. Now, I'm going to react to that and act like I'm telling you a personal anecdote. Something to break the tension. Something to endear myself a little bit. Something kind of embarrassing. And you guys are going to make an awe sound. It's true. It really happened. And now I'm going to bring it to a broader point. I'm going to reel you back in. I'm going to make it intellectual. I'm going to bring it to this man right here. Now, what this man did was important, I'm sure. But I, for one, have no idea who he is. I simply Google image the word scientist. And now, you see, I'd like it to seem like I'm making points, building an argument, inspiring you to change your life, when in reality, this is just me buying time. Now,
Okay, you get the idea. We could go on with this. It's 12 minutes long, so I want you guys to Google that and pass it around. It's gone viral every time I've shared it with somebody. So now I want to talk a little bit more seriously and go to a storyteller who's really local and a great CEO, a great founder, Mike Zelkin, who started his business right here at 80 Acres. Let's take a look at how he tells the story to a TED audience that he also tells to investors, to customers, to retailers, and media.
Think about the best, juiciest, sweetest tomato you've ever had in your life. Where were you? Who were you with? I was in my grandpa's garden. That, by the way, is really me. A few years ago. I was 4 or 5. It was summer. Seems now like it was always 75 and sunny. I remember those tomatoes like they were yesterday. They were sweet, they were juicy, they were ripe. They were incredible. I'd be running around with my brother and sister, and I'd sneak into a garden to get some of those tomatoes. They were clean, too. My grandpa never used any pesticides, so I could just pop them right off of the vine and pop them into my mouth and enjoy them right there. Those tomatoes were grown with love, and they tasted like sunshine. Have you ever had a tomato like that? Yeah. It's hard to get a tomato like that today, though. Because even though we all want fresh produce 365 days a year, it doesn't grow where most of us live. Most of our fruits and vegetables come from California or Florida, and they have to come all the way across the country. The issue is that with all the droughts and all the expensive land and just lack of available land, we have to import more and more produce from other countries. That's a few more food miles. So what? What's the big deal? Why does that make your tomato in a grocery store so tasteless? Well, remember my grandpa's tomato? That sweet, juicy, fully ripened tomato? You can't transfer that tomato all the way across the country. It's turned to mush.
Okay, great example there, and I'm kind of thinking now, watching him, that he's sort of like the Steve Jobs of ag tech. And one thing that I know about Mike is that when he goes into a pitch, when he goes into a presentation, he really practices and rehearses. And so in his car, he's constantly practicing as he's driving. As he's doing his exercise cycle in the morning, he spends time kind of going through what is it that he intends to say and how is he going to do it. So, so a great lesson from Steve Jobs and from Mike, sort of another kind of figure that is sort of like Steve Jobs. So next, I'm going to give sort of a framework, and I've got some handouts up here if anybody's interested in picking this up. But sometimes I think it's helpful to have a framework for this area of messaging. And so one thing I really believe in, and the science shows, that people can remember sort of three things. But the three things need to kind of be repeated sort of over and over and over again. Not that you want to do that in a pitch, but it's a great idea. Like we were doing the media training for the person, and we said, at the beginning, you want to get your three messages in. You want to answer the questions as best you can during the interview, moving back and bridging back to those three key messages. And then at the end, there's often an opportunity to kind of bottom line it. So how can you come back and do that? And so I've put together sort of a framework here, mainly based on founders, but hopefully it'll be relevant for others. And I'm positing here that it's helpful to think about your overall messaging in terms of your product, which could be your company, it could be yourself personally, the context, and then your sort of credentials and what you bring to the table. So let's talk about each one. And again, for each point, I want you to think about one area that you'd like to focus on in the next 10 minutes or so. So is it a story about your product? Is it a story about your experience and the great reaction that people are getting to your product or service? Or is there something, as we looked back and talked about the target consumer or the target market, is there something that can really come to life there? So I want you to spend a few minutes thinking about, is there a killer story that you guys can use, similar to some of the examples that you've seen, that really kind of bring to life the mission of your company, the mission you have personally, or what you're trying to do as a startup founder. So take a few minutes, and if you want to brainstorm with someone next to you, that's fine too. And then we'll come back and we'll take 2 or 3 examples, hopefully. So, and we'll give you guys a microphone and give you a chance. It can be 30 seconds, doesn't have to be a big rehearsed presentation. So take a few minutes and we'll come back and we'll talk about it. Excellent. All right. I see a lot of good discussions. So who would like to bravely volunteer to be the first storyteller? And again, it doesn't have to be big, elaborate. It can be brief, and then we'll talk about it and do some others. So who'd like to lead off?
Test.
Kate can hopefully entice some people here. All right. Our youngest participant, audience member.
So at Madeira High School, I'm taking an entrepreneurship class. And there's 3 groups. Basically, you find an organization and you start a nonprofit to help support them. So I met with my group.
Can you put your microphone a little closer?
So I met with my group, and we realized that a lot of us are passionate about art. We realized how important it is. So we decided to go with the Kennedy Heights Art Center to support it. So we raised money for Kennedy Heights Art Center through our class, and it's basically teaching us how we're basically just learning the ins and outs of what we can do. So we're learning how to sell products, how to market, and what we're really trying to do is we're just trying to take a community like Madeira that we're very fortunate and share some of our resources to some people that are less fortunate, and really trying to engage everybody and reach out. And right now our main audience is Madeira, but we're trying to bring it out more, and we're just getting started, and we're just trying to get everybody involved, and it's just been a good learning experience, and I'm just hoping to see where it can go.
That's great. Really draws you in and makes you think, what's next. So thank you very much. Anybody else? All right, great.
To have happy lives, we need a stable income. And for stable incomes, we need jobs. And for jobs, we need to apply for jobs. And when we apply for jobs, there comes anxiety. And these feelings about, am I a good fit for this company? And for the least, if we get rejection, do we get any feedback where it can be improved? And that's where Xerix comes in. It helps candidates get that feedback, enhance their experience, and help employers make an informed decision.
That's great. Thank you very much. Let's give them a round of applause. That's great, because again, it identifies a big picture mission and really what the product can do. So very good. I think we have time for one more. All right, in the back.
Thank you. I was taking notes on my iPad and it just died. So we'll see how this goes. I grew up in a household where self-improvement audiobooks replaced cartoons. It was fun. And as I got older, going through high school and college, I found that I was just able to start applying these principles without much second thought because I grew up with it. But as I started to get into the world, I realized that the world of self-improvement remains inaccessible and super overly complicated to a lot of us. So I've made it my mission to provide women everywhere with the tools and resources that they need to bridge the gap between who they are and who they want to be. These are resources like templates and journaling, resources, guides, and online courses to really help every woman to realize her potential and express, who she could be and who she wants to be.
Great. Let's give her a round of applause. So a great example there of laying out sort of the origin story, the great childhood story, and then I know we got to go in a second, and then really bringing it home with the product benefit and so forth. So in closing, as Pete said, I am here every morning. I'm in the first floor area, so I'm always happy to give back. So if you ever want to reach out via email or have a cup of coffee, I'm always happy to talk. And in closing, I just want to say that don't be like this guy. Be like this guy, and this is going to finish his story. Won't take long, Kate.
Let's imagine for a minute a world where our kids crave these sweet, juicy, perfectly ripe tomatoes as much as they crave candy today. A future where instead of taking insulin shots, we can eat a salad. A future where we will place our grow zones all over the world, from sub-Saharan Africa to the Middle East, feeding our populations where they're growing, regardless of their natural environmental conditions or availability of resources, taking a small but critical step towards ending world hunger. I stand in front of you today because 40 years ago, my grandfather inspired me with that little tomato to begin a career in food. I've worked hard for the last 25 years to bring good food to people everywhere. I never dreamt that at this point in my career, I'd be farming in the middle of a city. I never dreamt that heads of state would be calling me, asking me to build farms to help them feed their people. I never dreamt that I'll be part of the next food revolution. These ideas, these visions, these dreams are not just dreams anymore. We're making them reality right here in Cincinnati, Ohio, every day, one tomato at a time. Thank you.
All right, great. So great job being here today. Great job proving my friend wrong. And thank you very much.